would not have signed off on the manifest.
There you go.
They and their 105 passengers would still be alive. Four days after the crash of Flight 592, hazardous materials specialist Jim Henderson joins the team.
Initial documentation that we were looking for was the records of where the chemical oxygen generators had come from, how they got on the airplane.
Henderson reviews the history of the Valujet fleet.
We found out that Valujet had recently purchased 3 airplanes from other carriers.
Well, I think I know where they came from.
Valujet's work order on these airplanes basically were to open the plane up, find out what the dates were on the generators.
Oxygen generators have a shelf life. To meet federal safety standards, any out-of-date generators on the recently purchased planes needed to be replaced. That job was given to a company called Sabertech.
We spoke to the maintenance personnel primarily to find out how these were handled.
Thanks for taking the time.
The chemical oxygen generators had been removed from an airplane. We wanted to make sure that they were handled in accordance with their work cards.
Henderson learns that Sabertech removed 144 oxygen generators. Most of them were out of date, but still full. There are strict guidelines regulating how oxygen generators are to be removed and shipped safely.
The work orders basically described how to take them off the aircraft and how to replace the new generators on the aircraft. Once removed from the aircraft, one of the safety precautions is to replace the safety cap that keeps it from accidentally activating.
It says we should put shipping caps on them. Do we have any?
Many of the mechanics realized how dangerous they were. The mechanics recognized the need for safety caps. Several mechanics told us in interviews that they had advised their supervisors of the need for safety caps.
They look like this. Did you see any?
No, they didn't have any. And you can't take them off the new ones.
Henderson learns that since they didn't have protective caps, Sabertech mechanics improvised.
The maintenance people didn't have the safety caps. One of the other things that was mentioned on the work order was that they take the lanyards and wrap them around the oxygen generator. There were several others who felt that the lanyards were unnecessary, so they actually physically cut the lanyards off, leaving the pins basically free inside of the generator.
Did you put any labels on the actual generators?
After I pulled them out, I put a green tag on them.
On the tags, Sabertech workers wrote the word expired. What investigators still don't know is how the 144 oxygen generators ended up on a passenger plane weeks later.
And at that point, they're to be disposed. Now, the disposal requires it to be disposed as a hazardous waste.
When investigators interview Sabertech shipping staff, they learned that the generators sat in the hangar for weeks.
Sabertech had a new customer coming in, and they wanted to clean up the area for the new customer to give them a good impression of their company. As far as they were concerned, they were Valujet's material, and therefore they were to be returned to Valujet.
Investigators discover that the potentially hazardous generators were on Flight 592 due to a misunderstanding over a single word: expired.
Did someone actually think that expired meant empty?
The shipping papers describe the oxygen generators as oxy, or XY for oxygen, canisters, and then the word empty. This was a big problem because these oxygen generators weren't empty. They had expired, but expiration just meant that they had exceeded their shelf life. The use of the term empty was an error on his part. However, the shipping clerk himself wasn't that familiar with the oxygen generators. They were still capable of generating oxygen. They hadn't been properly safed. They hadn't been properly packaged. So we were really concerned that this might be either what caused the accident or what made the fire worse.
On May the 11th, 1996, airport workers loaded potentially flammable cargo onto Valujet 592. However, the DC-9's cargo hold is specifically designed to contain a fire.
Regulations required that the cargo hold be airtight. If, in fact, you do have a fire in that cargo hold, it'll burn itself out because it's airtight.
But would a cargo fire burn out if the cargo itself produced oxygen?
We knew about the oxygen generators. We knew the potential they had for being a fire source, but we didn't really know, in the grand scheme of things, their real potential for bringing down an aircraft.
At an FAA fire test facility,
Okay, let's do this.
they hope to recreate the fire that consumed Flight 592.
1 minute to ignition.
We had to trigger one of the oxygen generators manually.
Nothing at all.
We didn't really get much of a fire.
An activated oxygen generator isn't enough to set fire to the cardboard box it's packed in.
So how did these things start a fire?
NTSB investigators are back at square one. They can't prove their theory.
What were these things packed in?
The failure of the fire test prompts investigators to look more closely at exactly how the oxygen generators were packaged for transport.
The first test we did, we had not packed them exactly the way they were packed.
You need a layer of bubble wrap. Like
We
this
did not
in every
use
box.
bubble wrap in the first test. That is, put bubble wrap over the top of the generators before we closed the box. We put 5 boxes of oxygen generators, put them on top of a tire, and put some luggage around them.
Okay, let's start it up.
It made an unbelievable noise. It was a high-pitched scream. We all looked at each other. We were kind of startled. I mean, the sound was deafening.
Ten minutes after ignition, the ceiling of the test cargo container reaches 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Lord almighty.
We almost destroyed their test facility.
After 11 minutes, it exceeds the capacity of the monitoring equipment.
All right, let's get that fire out.
We had a raging fire, and none of us had expected a fire to be that big and that hot. And it was just amazing to see how disastrous, how destructive something this long and that big around could be.
The experiment supports the NTSB theory. Improperly packaged oxygen generators caused the crash of Valujet 592. Even in an airtight cargo hold, the fire would have burned fiercely enough to bring down the DC-9.
The problem with Flight 592 is that you defeat the intended purpose of the Class D cargo hold, because even though the hold may be airtight, you've got 144 sources of oxygen in that airtight container.
Investigators now suspect that the accidental activation of a generator during loading or on takeoff is all that it took to trigger a disaster that claimed 110 lives. With the help of the plane's flight recorders,
oxygen generators are loaded sometime after 1300.
Investigators are able to reconstruct the final moments of Valujet 592.
Target rate.
Gear up.
There was a muffled bump or thump that had come off the cockpit voice recorder, which prompted the captain to ask,
What was that?
I don't know.
that muffled noise, that thump, when you marry that information up to the flight data recorder, it happened at the same time that we saw the bump in the static pressure.
The sound recorded on the CVR is the tire exploding, the same explosion picked up by the flight data recorder.
What kind of problem are you having?
Fire.
Smoke in the cabin.
It's been 30 seconds since the explosion. Hazen requests a return to Miami.
592 needs immediate return to Miami.
We can hear a lot of background noises. We have the flight attendant coming up front.
Completely on fire.
She's talking about how bad the fire is, and the last part of it is silent.
And then nothing.
There is no crew interaction. There is no talking. There is no verbal communication. All you hear is the sound of the wind. It indicated to us that whatever was happening was fast, incapacitated the flight crew to the point where they were unconscious.
It only took 3 minutes and 42 seconds for the fire to bring down the plane.
There was no chance of getting the plane to the ground safely. In the wake of the accident, the FAA grounds Valujet indefinitely. The National Transportation Safety Board recommends better training for employees who handle oxygen generators.
There weren't any bad guys with black hats. They were all people just trying to get by, doing the best they could.
The NTSB also renews its call from 8 years earlier to have smoke detectors and fire extinguishers installed in the cargo holds of all passenger jets.
FAA turned around after Valujet crashed and mandated fire suppression and fire alerting systems, but they should have done that a long time ago.
An inferno, what a hell those people went through.
And our loved ones are dead because this agency has not done its job.
It's classic tombstone regulation. You build a body count, and that body count is the only thing that sways people to go out and do anything.
The Secretary of Transportation lost his job. The administrator of the FAA lost his job because of this one accident.
It was a very important lesson, and it's unfortunate that it comes about with this kind of cost, but this was a case that did make major changes in the industry, that we all work together to make sure this doesn't happen again.